Hey there. History fans, did you know there's a war that was shorter than your average lunch break? Seriously. It was the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896 and it lasted less than an hour. You'd think someone forgot to set their alarm clock. It sounds crazy, but it really happened. Stick around and I'll tell you all about this blink and you'll miss it war. So picture this, Zanzibar, a beautiful island off the coast of East Africa, famous for spices and beautiful beaches. Sounds lovely, right? Well, things weren't so peaceful back then. Zanzibar was ruled by a sultan, basically a king. And when the old sultan died, there was a bit of a power struggle. See, the British Empire, those chaps with a knack for being everywhere, had their eye on Zanzibar. They wanted a say in who was running the show. Now, the British had a favourite for the new sultan, someone they could work with. But then, this guy named Khalid bin Bargash decided he wanted the throne, and he wasn't exactly the British's cup of tea. The British told Khalid, "Look, old boy, step aside or there'll be trouble." But Khalid, being a rather stubborn fellow, basically said, "Make me. Big mistake, Khalid. You don't want to pick a fight with the British Empire unless you've got a lot of time on your hands." And in this case, Khalid had about 40 minutes to be precise. Section 4. Bombs away. So the British were not messing around. They had a clear plan and were ready to execute it with precision. They sailed their warships into Zanzibar's harbour and pointed their cannons at the Sultan's palace. The tension in the air was palpable as the British forces prepared for action. Talk about an awkward morning wake-up call. Imagine waking up to the sight of massive warships and cannons aimed right at your home. At 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, the British gave the signal, and all heck broke loose. The precision and timing were impeccable, showcasing the might of the British Navy. Cannons roared, buildings crumbled, and the Sultan's palace quickly started looking like Swiss cheese. The destruction was swift and overwhelming, leaving no room for resistance. Now you'd think the Sultan would put up a fight, right? Maybe rally his troops, show some defiance in the face of such aggression. Maybe rally his troops, build some barricades, I don't know, something, but nope, not Khalid. He seemed paralyzed by the sheer force of the British attack. He decided to take the express lane out of there. In a moment of sheer panic, he fled, leaving his palace and his people behind to face the aftermath. Section 5. A 40-minute war. This is the story of the shortest war in history, a conflict so brief that it was over before most people even knew it had started. While the British were busy playing target practice with his palace, Khalid decided to pack his bags and make a run for it. The British naval forces unleashed a relentless bombardment on the Sultan's palace, turning it into a smouldering ruin within minutes. He escaped through a back door and hopped on a boat, leaving his poor soldiers to fend for themselves. The Sultan's hasty retreat was a desperate move, abandoning his loyal troops who were left bewildered and leaderless. And that, my friends, was basically the end of the Anglo-Zanzibar War. The British forces, with their superior firepower and strategic advantage, had swiftly brought the conflict to a close. The British bombarded the palace for about 40 minutes. The Sultan ran away, and everyone else was left standing there wondering what the heck just happened. The scene was one of utter chaos and confusion, with the Sultan's forces in disarray and the British firmly in control. The official surrender came at 9:40 a.m., making it the shortest recorded war in history. The entire conflict lasted just 40 minutes, a mere blip in the annals of military history. I mean, seriously, you could barely make a decent pot of tea in that time. The brevity of the war was almost comical, a stark contrast to the prolonged and bloody conflicts that have marked human history. The Anglo-Zanzibar War serves as a curious footnote in the history of colonialism, a reminder of the swift and often brutal nature of imperial power. Sultan Khalid's brief resistance was no match for the might of the British Empire, and his flight marked the end of an era for Zanzibar. In the end, the war was a testament to the overwhelming dominance of the British forces and the futility of resistance against such a formidable opponent. The legacy of the 40-minute war lives on as a fascinating, if somewhat absurd, chapter in the history of warfare. Section 6. History's shortest war. So there you have it, the Anglo-Zanzibar War. A 40-minute explosion of confusion, bad decisions, and surprisingly few casualties. This brief yet intense conflict took place on August 27, 1896, between the British Empire and the Sultanate of Zanzibar. The war was triggered by the sudden death of Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini and the succession of Sultan Khalid bin Bargash, who was not favored by the British. It's a reminder that sometimes history can be just as weird and hilarious as it is tragic and profound. The British, with their superior naval power, managed to bombard the Sultan's palace and bring the conflict to a swift end. Despite the brevity of the war, it left a lasting impression on those who study history. Now, some people argue that there might have been even shorter wars out there, tiny skirmishes that lasted a few minutes. These minor conflicts, often overlooked, were usually resolved quickly due to the overwhelming power of one side or the immediate surrender of the other. But none of them have the official record of the Anglo-Zanzibar War. This war holds the Guinness World Record for the shortest war in history, a title that has yet to be challenged. So the next time you're feeling stressed about a deadline, just remember the Anglo-Zanzibar War. If a war could be started and finished in less than an hour, surely you can tackle your tasks with a bit more ease. If they could wrap up a whole war before breakfast, you can definitely handle that to-do list. So take a deep breath, focus, and get things done. History shows us that even the most daunting tasks can be completed swiftly with the right approach.